Hello and welcome to the AFC BiteSize Podcast. This is our second preseason episode. Today we're going to do an FPL special looking at the key Arsenal assets in Fantasy Premier League for the 22-23 season. I'm, of course, FPL Nima, and I'm joined by my co-host Clayton, who's at AFC BiteSize Pod on Twitter. How are you doing, mate? It's good to see you today.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's been a few weeks since our first one, and had a nice weekend. Been watching watching most of the women's Euros at the moment, and actually went to two of the games over the weekend. So was at Brighton on Friday for Austria, Norway, and then where did I go Saturday? Brentford Stadium for Denmark and Spain. So yeah, that was quite good. Ticking off some grounds that I've not had the chance to do so far. So yeah, it was good in the heat. And then, like I was saying to you before, I was at a wedding yesterday as well. So feeling a little bit ropey, especially in the heat. But all good. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm off to Portugal next week to get married. So
nice.
I know
to get married. Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was meant to be in 2020, but it got pushed back twice, and I got married in London in the meantime. So it's more of an anniversary and a holiday.
Oh, amazing.
Still going to do the ceremony again, right? We paid the deposit. Can't get out of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. So obviously we've got some exciting stuff today, some new graphics. Would love feedback from anyone watching. If you do find today's video useful to help you pick your FPL team or just to get some insights into Arsenal, some tactical insights into the way we play, please do hit like at the end if you find it useful and help us on our journey to 100 subscribers. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify as well, we would really love a review on there so you can help us get some reviews on the board. So I think we did a Arsenal squad recap, didn't we, last episode? So what I'll do is I'll put a card here for anyone who missed that they can go back and look at the depth in the different positions. So we won't kind of go back over that again a second time today. But what we will do is we'll just kind of start to look at the FPL prices of the players, I think, and go straight from there. So obviously the game has launched. We got here Bukayo Saka, 8 million as a midfielder. Ramsdale, 5 million as a goalkeeper. Odegaard, 6.5 million as a midfielder. And then in the defense, we have Tomiyasu and White, both at 4.5 million. Gabriel and Tierney, both at 5 million. Martinelli in midfield at 6 million. Smith-Rowe at 6 million. Fabio Vieira, the new signing we discussed previously, at 6 million. And then Nketiah as a forward at 7 million. Since this release, obviously, Gabriel Jesus has signed. So he's come in as an 8 million forward.
Bargain.
I think... Yeah, I feel like it's incredible. It's 2-3 million cheaper than he's ever been in FPL. And I think with regular minutes, people will be surprised by what he can do. He might kind of be almost like a premium at a non-premium price point this year, right?
Yeah, I think people really underestimate the idea of what impact it will be him moving to a team, being the main man. And I can't remember who tweeted it, but it's such a good point. When you're at City, you're surrounded by players at that sort of level. And I don't know, they're similar to Alexis vibes about this transfer, isn't it? Where it's not that he was a bit part player at City, but he wasn't that sort of main man. And now he's coming to a team where he will have that freedom. I'm excited. And I'm sure we'll touch on him in a bit more detail later on.
Yeah, we will. So I guess just to add to that in the conversation, I think for me it's similar. It feels like when I saw him in preseason, just the energy and the chaos and drive he has. When you've got a player like that in the squad, it kind of makes the rest of the players up their level and energy levels too. So similar to what we saw with Sanchez when he arrived, kind of unlocked more out of Ozil, didn't it? So I'm really excited about his signing. I think it's probably the biggest signing we've made in, I'd say, 5 years, maybe even the past decade in terms of the impact it's going to have for our squad. So really keen to see what Arteta does after signing his first ever forward. Obviously, being at the club, he's just been focusing on kind of defenders up until now. So I think a lot of people will be surprised by what having a mobile forward again at Arsenal could mean for the team and for our FPL points. We'll look at the teams later, but I have 3 Arsenal players in my current FPL draft. So we'll see whether I keep it.
I don't think I'll be far behind you on that as well. I genuinely think, we can go straight into it, but I think some of the prices are really, really kind. I think there's a few bargains in there, which we'll touch on. But I think, did you want to go touch on the fixture difficulties?
Yeah, let's definitely look at that. I think one thing that's worth bearing in mind for anyone who is new to this kind of stuff in FPL, I don't really respect the idea of a fixture difficulty that is just one number, because a fixture can be great for an attack, but bad for the defense and vice versa. Yeah. So what we've done is we've taken the data from Fantasy Football Hub and looked at the first 8 game weeks. And we're essentially just trying to look at, in the first game weeks 1 to 8, which teams have the best attacking FDR. So the goals for column here that it's sorted by shows how many goals is predicted to be scored by each team. And you can see over an 8-week spell, Arsenal only faced one of the top 6 of last year, which is Man United in game week 6. So they actually are here at 12.2, just 0.1 below Brentford, making them the second best team from an attacking point of view over this spell. I think a lot of people on the timeline, they've been looking at kind of the first 4 game weeks, the first 6 game weeks. Perhaps Arsenal doesn't appear as high in those kind of shorter time frames. But my view is that the way this season is kind of laid out, we're going to have quarters, and the first wildcard is likely to be used around game week 9. And that's probably the latest you want to use it to maximize it. So if that's the case, I want to be looking at assets that I potentially won't need to change for any of this spell. And with the bargain kind of prices we're talking about of the Arsenal assets, I think there's definitely a case to be made for buying them in game week 1 and kind of just keeping them throughout. What are your kind of thoughts here? Because obviously there's a lot of teams here that people probably wouldn't have thought about. I think Brentford and Brighton, like, they are discussed a lot on the timeline, but the likes of kind of Leeds and Nottingham Forest are here. And people have said Forest have a terrible start. But again, when you look beyond just 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I think the attacking FDR changes quite significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah, like you said, Brentford, Brighton, Leeds, Forest, they've all got brilliant starts to them when you actually look over that 8-game period. But I think I really like what you said about breaking down the season into different chunks. And it's interesting what you said about Arsenal not being so high on people's FDRs for like the first 4 fixtures. Because as I look at that, fair enough, Palace away, we struggled there last season. But I don't know, I'm looking at that fixture, and maybe it's just pre-season naive, a bit like me being a bit naive, but last season we struggled there because we had a couple key players missing. I felt nervous going into that game anyway, because I think the way we play structurally, we like to maximize space on the pitch. Palace is a tight ground, right? And I knew we would struggle to play our game, but you had people like Gallagher pressing and he was relentless. He's not going to be there. Not that he was the only reason they destroyed us, but I don't know. I just think if we're getting the likes of Zinchenko and someone like Gabriel Jesus up top now, that technical security we'll have going there, I feel not confident we'll win, but I feel more confident than I did going in there last time. And then looking ahead, Leicester at home, I don't know, us at home, we're a different team. That's just like I said, when we're playing at home, it's a bigger pitch. We can spread the play as we want. We can overload on one side, switch it over, which is how we try to play. And then after that, so Leicester at home doesn't scare me. And then you've got Bournemouth and Fulham, 2 promoted sides. So I look at that first 4 and I think I'd be disappointed if we didn't get 7-9 points, if I'm being honest. How about yourself? When you're looking
I think we need a really big start. So I do think Crystal Palace away from home, Friday, floodlights, starting the Premier League season 2 years in a row. There is definitely some ropey elements to that. And obviously Vieira, the manager. But at the same time, with the loss of Gallagher, I do think that we will be better off. And we're going to have a full preseason for a lot of players. And they're going to work on their chemistry together. And I'm not as afraid as I would have been against Palace at their stadium last year, of course. I think Neil Zapples is one of the live chat. I just put his comment up. He kind of agrees with you that it's a little bit harsh, colour of Crystal Palace, dark red, essentially, without Gallagher. But I guess this is kind of the other side of the FPL tools equation is a lot of these models is worth trying to find out what inputs they use, because the numbers don't lie, but the numbers also don't have context or subjective elements. So it's not going to look at like who they've signed. It's going to look at how they've done recently and their underlying kind of stats. So based on last season's Palace, it would look much more difficult. But we know obviously things have changed. We've strengthened. They've maybe weakened a bit. They've lost that dynamo in midfield in Gallagher. So I think that's a good point.
Looking at that, so take it as a block of 4, block of 8, whatever you prefer. So I guess just for those on the podcast version, we've got Palace away, Leicester home, Bournemouth away, Fulham home, Villa home, Man United away, Everton home, Brentford away. Like you said, this is the attacking FDR. Attacking assets, I know we'll talk on it a bit later, but does that excite you? Because I guess the flip side is on the next slide, you've got the defensive FDR and how that's covered.
Yeah, we'll go to the defense in a moment. I think from an attacking point of view, this kind of screams to me that Jesus at 8 million is like a set and forget at the start of the season. As I say, I consider him to potentially be pulling up premium level numbers at a kind of semi-budget priced point. So I think he's already well on his way to becoming one of the most owned assets going into game week 1. So there is massive danger to go without him. But that shouldn't be the reason we go for him. And we'll look at some of Jesus' stats since he joined the Premier League. And there's obviously a lot more to the player than just being a City reject, as some people on the timeline might joke. I think the other thought here is it worth doubling up on the attack with this kind of cheaper assets that we were looking at on the previous page? So, you've got the likes of kind of Martinelli at 6 million, Smith Rowe at 6 million, and Nketiah at 7 million. Saka's also 8 million. So from an attacker's point of view, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. But yeah, why don't we go to the defensive FDR? But just before we do that, I'm going to give a quick shout out to a couple of the guys who've tuned in live. Really appreciate this. I think this is the highest number of concurrent live views we've had. So I think we had 6 or 7 last week. So we're up to 8. So much love for all of you guys. Sankal, a good friend of mine. He's here live as well. Good to see you, mate. We've got Blue Danube guy. We will answer these questions towards the end as a live Q&A. So what I'll do is I'll favorite some of these questions now so that we can come back to them. There's some questions that we will come back to. Evening Niels, good to see you, mate. Evening Christopher Tellez as well. Good to see you. William, thank you for tuning in. And I totally agree. I would love to just take that point away at Palace if we can win the rest. Good to see D Chin, another fellow Gooner. FPL Penguin, good to see you as well, mate. Lovely that you've tuned in. I am melting here, but hopefully you can't hear the fan in the background. And we will also talk about the penalty situation in a bit, Neil. So kind of that's the shout outs out of the way for now. We'll shout out people as they come in. But let's go to the defensive FDR. So this paints a slightly different picture from game week 1 to 8. Here, obviously, we see Man City, Brighton, and Liverpool all at the top. But you can see actually the predicted number of clean sheets is 2, which is the same as Arsenal and Leeds. So although we're all the way down in kind of 4th, they probably have slightly better defensive FDR, but the predicted clean sheets is very similar for all 5 of those teams I mentioned. With that in mind, obviously the City defenders, they're pretty pricey. Brighton are perhaps on par with Dunk. He's 4.5. So, Sanchez is 4.5. So maybe we could debate the Brighton defenders against Arsenal defenders and goalkeeper. But Liverpool and City are obviously at a premium price point. So I think considering Arsenal have a similar FDR, despite the much cheaper price point, like, Tomiyasu is 3 million cheaper than Trent. He's not going to get these attacking returns. But if you want the clean sheets, like for 3 million less, I don't hate it having an Arsenal defender as a kind of 4th or 5th defender that you can just play all this first stretch of games. What are your thoughts on the defense? Are you looking at any of them to start game week 1 with?
Yeah, definitely. I think similar to how I'm thinking when you showed the previous slide and the attacking FDR, I'm looking at that block of fixtures and I'm trying to predict it. I know it says there we're predicted 2 clean sheets. I'm trying to think those things never sort of pan out that way, do they? So I'm looking at this set of fixtures going game by game. Do I personally think clean sheet? And I'm being honest with myself. Palace, no. Leicester, Bournemouth, Fulham, Villa, I would be disappointed if we didn't get more than 2 or more clean sheets in that block. Man United, Everton, Brentford, I think 1. So what's that? That's 3 clean sheets that I'm expecting at a minimum in the first 8. And I like those odds. I think more because of the price. Like you said, someone like Tomiyasu, if he's fit to start the season, Ben White, if he's fit as well, 4.5 million. You pay, like, this is a block of 8, but you're paying 4.5 million pounds for a top 6 defense. And I guess we can touch on that now defensively, how people perceive us. But I think through the way we're looking to play and the signings we're making and heading towards that technical dominance, I think our defense will improve in that aspect as well, by just keeping the ball more. So I look at that set and I really like it. I think I just need to, I've not actually played around with having a draft or anything yet, so I need to figure out if I'm going 1 defender, 2 attackers, or the other way around. But how about yourself? How do you look at that, Ron?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to have a defender. I've had Tomiyasu the whole time, just because with the arrival of Saliba, I was a little bit worried about what that might mean for Ben White. I know that obviously he could play with Gabriel, but he's versatile. He can play left centre-back, right centre-back, Saliba. So there is a world where him and White both start. There's a world where White could play right back if Tomiyasu's injured. And we want Ben White to be there on the right back position with him covering if Saliba pushes forward and makes some marauding runs. So there's definitely some opportunities where White could be out the team, and therefore Tomiyasu is the one I'm after. I was really impressed with him last season, as I said in the episode last time round. He was one of my kind of star performers of last season. But equally, we've now read that he's potentially, having some niggling issues, and he wasn't part of the preseason matches yet. So I would say that, we're about 2 weeks, 3 weeks out from the season starting. So don't take what we say today as gospel. Like, do check the preseason minutes and see who is actually fit. If people like Tomiyasu have had no minutes before game week 1, potentially avoid them to start with and get on the first wildcard. But I think it's a good time to bring up some of the comparisons then. So White is also 4.5 million. I pulled up their stats for any podcast listeners who can't see this for all of the game weeks last year, all 38 game weeks. So immediately we can see that Tomiyasu was out for a spell. He only played about 1,600 minutes compared to 2,800 for Ben White. He got 2 yellow cards, but with the minutes, Ben White in many more minutes got 3 yellow cards, so there isn't much there. Something you can notice, though, is that there is 20 goals conceded when Tomiyasu played versus 35 when White played. So you could argue that there was also obviously the missing times where Partey was gone, so perhaps that had an impact. 9 clean sheets while Tomiyasu played, so we were really having a good time then, versus 13 for the extra 1,200 minutes that Ben White played, so only 4 more clean sheets. And the expected points as well, the points they got per 90 was 4.01 for Tomiyasu versus 3.34 for White. So for me, Tomiyasu slightly edges him. I really like him. He can play left back as well, as we saw. I think it was against Leeds. He was put there to nullify Rafinha. So he can also play centre back. I believe he plays as a left centre back for Japan. So he's very versatile. He can always play anywhere in the back line. And as long as he does seem fit and this niggling doubt is gone in the preseason, I will be remaining with Tomiyasu. He's not left any of my drafts.
Okay.
I have 3 premium defenders. So I have a City, Chelsea, and Liverpool defender. And my plan is to just keep that 4th spot for a 4.5 million Arsenal player and play them every week. I don't intend on rotating them. I'll have a 4 million 5th defender in Neco Williams. So we'll look at my draft later, but that's kind of my immediate thoughts. But I know that when we look at kind of last season's points and predicted points for next year, there's some 5 million assets in the defense that you've got your eye on, don't you?
Yeah, I know you're not a fan because of his injuries, but Tierney for me, do you know what? The Zinchenko signing for me excites me more about what it unlocks for other areas of the team. So, well, I'm saying that like we've signed him, just for the ease of this conversation, just assuming that goes ahead. And I personally think Zinchenko is being signed to come in and play that left 8 role. I don't think he's being signed to come and be a starting left back. But like we said before we spoke on here, he's not going to displace Xhaka immediately, but it will be, well, he might, but I doubt it will be sort of against Palace. But the flip side is he's also being signed because we can't rely on Tierney, unfortunately. As much as I love him, he won't be fit for 38 games, right? So for me, Tierney and Gabriel are 2 I've got my eye on. Like I said, I've not actually made a draft, so I've not compared to other prices. My thinking today is just in isolation of Arsenal, and I'll sort of give my opinion, let people make up their own comparisons to other teams and stuff. But the reason Zinchenko excites me to go for Tierney is the way I'm expecting us to play is Zinchenko kind of tucking in as that left 8, in that left 8 position. And I think if you look at last season, the triangles on the right, Tomiyasu, when they were all fit, Tomiyasu, Odegaard, Saka, they had that on lock, and Partey is like the nucleus in the middle. He was able to distribute them, and they would just choreograph everything on that right hand side. I think we became far too dependent on that, and it wasn't an issue because the Saka and Odegaard's partnership is just brilliant. But when we had someone like Lacazette, it was causing problems in the end. So what I think we're trying to do is move away from that that reliance on the right and recreate it on the left. And the way I envisage it playing out, I don't know if you'd agree on this, is I think Zinchenko, Tierney, and in my opinion, Martinelli are the 3 that are going to be creating those triangles on the left. And what I think is Zinchenko is going to sort of be that, like I said, he'll tuck in. That will create space for Tierney as the outlet on the left. And then what that then does with Tierney operating in that space is it opens and vacates space in between the fullback and the centre back for, in my opinion, Martinelli to operate in those inside forward areas. So again, I've touched on Martinelli there, but we'll go on to midfielders in a bit.
Yeah, I won't talk about Martinelli yet. Yeah. We'll wait for midfielders.
No. But it was just the Zinchenko signing for me really excites me for Tierney, because I think he's going to be operating in that area where he's more comfortable driving up the channel, getting crosses in. He's got a striker with great movement now that he can aim for. But to your point, which you've said before, can we rely on him? I'm not so sure. The other one I just want to add in is, in my opinion, we're a good team from set pieces. Gabriel, what did he score? 5 goals last season? Again, 5 million.
He's a big threat. Yeah, big threat.
Yeah, 5 million. It's 0.5 more than Tomiyasu. And yeah, if I'm being honest, I think Tomiyasu probably is my first choice. I just wanted to throw a different angle out there for Tierney and Gabriel. What do you think about them two? Having done your
Why don't we
drafts,
look
do you
at
think they're too much?
why don't we look at their the performances last year then? So I've pulled up like kind of the amount of points last year, and you can see Gabriel did get 146 points, so he was our leading defender. Way behind him, nearly 40 points behind, was White at 107. Tierney obviously didn't play for a lot of the time, so 106 points. Tomiyasu also missed a lot of games, 75 points. Tavares, 49 points. I wouldn't look at going for him. I imagine he's probably going on loan. Cedric is there with 48, holding 29. Saliba obviously hasn't got any Premier League minutes yet. In goal as well, just while we're on the topic. So Ramsdale got 135 points for 5 mil. So
are you tempted? I forgot to ask about that. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so on paper, I think if I had to pick a 5 million defensive asset, I think it would be Gabriel or Tierney. As you were saying, Ramsdale, I feel like there's great options like Mendy for 5 mil from Chelsea. I do also think that for like half a mil less with like a Sanchez or a Raya or even a Meslier, you can kind of make up the points elsewhere. So like I'd rather have a combo of say Sanchez and Gabriel than Ramsdale and Dunk, I think personally. But that's the other thing I think with defense and cheap defensive assets. A lot of it comes about pairs. So I don't like to look at like say Gabriel in isolation or Ramsdale in isolation, because whichever one of them you buy, you got to consider what does it mean for the other position, because you know, like it's unlikely you're going to get Ramsdale and Tomiyasu or Ramsdale and Gabriel. Now some people might be very bullish on our defense and go for a double defense, with the kind of the other top 6 teams being very favorably priced as well. I can't see myself going for 2 of them. Zinchenko is obviously not here yet, but
does he
that excites me at 5 million if he's playing in midfield. Yeah, that could be like something that just puts him a little bit ahead of Gabriel for me. But for now, Gabriel's got the goal threat, as you say. He is a bit of a bonus points monster. He does accumulate them. So I'd be very tempted by Gabriel. The other flip side is I wonder how many more points he had if he didn't get a couple of those rash red cards. He can obviously be a bit rash sometimes. So
yeah, he's quite emotional, isn't he?
Yeah, so I wonder if that can be eased out of his game slightly. So that's kind of the defenders' points last season and goalkeepers. Why don't
if
we
you
go to
had
midfielders?
just one final one, I feel like a lot. You touched on it already. There's going to be rotation, right? If you had to predict one Arsenal player, well, not prediction, just in your opinion, who are you saying is the most nailed defender? Because I feel like that's what's going to come down to most people's decision making.
So that's why I went for Tomiyasu over White. I'm not convinced Gabriel is any more nailed than White with Saliba there. And we may play like a back 3 when we're away against teams like Chelsea and City and Liverpool, but that's only going to be sometimes. And the rest of the time, I could see a back 4 where it's kind of Tierney and Tomiyasu on the wings. If Tierney's injured, which I no doubt believe he'll break down, then Zinchenko might be there. And then we'll kind of have Gabriel and White, or Saliba and White, or Saliba and Gabriel. So I think something I read recently is Arteta essentially has like 8 different defense combinations he could now utilize in that article I sent you with these new signings coming in. So I don't think the back 4 will be as stable as we think. So maybe Ramsdale is your pick if you want to just have a guaranteed player, but I just think there's better value in goal. So I'm still on Tomiyasu. I don't think I'd be willing to spend the extra $500,000 on Gabriel. Zinchenko, on the other hand, he'd excite me. I'd need kind of confirmation. Like if Tierney was 100% fit and we see Zinchenko playing at left centre mid in preseason, then Tierney's exciting potentially. If Tierney's injured, I would actually still be very excited by Zinchenko at 5 mil, because people only want him because of being out of position in midfield. But I think something else I sent you was that when we're in possession, we play like a back 2 and the fullbacks tuck into midfield next to Partey, leaving the other 2 CMs in, say, Odegaard and potentially Xhaka, whoever it might be, like a Tielemans, I don't know who it might be there now, to push up next to Odegaard in the cam position. So you kind of end up in this weird 2-3, like 4-2 position, or 2-3-4-1 in possession. So really, even if Zinchenko is playing left back, every time we have the ball, he's still a left centre mid. Yeah, exactly. So he's going to do what Cancelo does. Like when you have the ball, he will be playing left centre mid in possession, even from left back. He'll only be in left back when we're defending and don't have the ball. So I don't think Zinchenko being at left back rules him out. I still find him more exciting than Gabriel personally, either way, as long as I know he's nailed to start. So let's go to midfielders then. We'll come back to
if
all
you
the
don't mind,
positions
just
after.
one final
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, of course.
This is just like an opinion of mine, but when looking at fixtures and targeting clean sheets, I think Arsenal are going to be one that the Emirates, in my opinion, is going to be a bit of a fortress this year. I think we saw it last year where, you know how I said we try to control the games with technical dominance. I think you're going to see games this season where we just suffocate teams, and I think from blood pressing from the front and the effect that that has going back to the defense, I think there's going to be quite a few games where at home it's looking like a plum fixture, and I would put good money on clean sheets, and I just think just keep that in mind with people when they're assessing Arsenal. I think there's a lot of prehistoric connotations around Arsenal, but I think that is changing, and I genuinely think the Emirates is going to be a bit of a fortress this year, and it's going to be a tough place to come and play.
You know, I'm excited to see, and the fans have never been closer aligned with the players and the team. I'm sure you noticed it last year. There was a point at which every game was sold out, like Red members couldn't get tickets anymore. All these people who'd stopped going to games for years were suddenly back. And there was just a good energy. Even when we went a goal down, the team was really being pushed on by the fans. There was a lot of belief that had been lacking for some time. So I'm really excited to see how much further we can take that. Okay, so yeah, we'll come back to defenders when we look at the predicted points and stuff. So I'm sure we'll cover that. But let's go to the midfielders. So obviously the attacking FDR is looking pretty good. If we were number 2 there for the first 8 game weeks. The two I have in mind are both playing on the left wing, competing with each other for the position. They're also both 6 million. So we have Martinelli and Smith Rowe. You can see here their minutes are pretty similar across the 38 weeks. So for the podcast listeners, Martinelli played 1,866 minutes. Smith Rowe played 1,920. The big difference, though, is Martinelli's underlying numbers are fantastic. So his big chances per 90 is 0.63, almost double that of Smith Rowe, 0.33. His XG per 90 is 0.37 compared to 0.28 for Smith Rowe. We also have his XA per 90 is 0.23 compared to 0.18. And his expected goal involvement percentage is 24% when he's on the pitch versus 19% for Smith Rowe. Now, what's interesting is I've left out the actual raw numbers of what the outcomes were. So on paper, with underlying statistics alone, Martinelli would seem head and shoulders above Smith Rowe. But Smith Rowe was very clinical last season, as we saw. So when you actually look at the goals and stuff, so Martinelli, he had 6 goals to Smith Rowe's 10, despite double the big chances per 90. And on the flip side, Martinelli had 7 assists to Smith Rowe's 2. So I think from a creativity point of view, Martinelli was definitely creating more, both underlying and outcome based. But from an actual goals point of view, Smith Rowe, he'd been asked by Arteta to score more goals and to get into position to score more goals and improve his finishing. And he had some fantastic goals, kind of late runs outside the box, kind of almost some of the shots looked like they were just like rolling in very slowly from like finesse, perfect accuracy, long distance. I'm not convinced over a long period of time that those kind of underlyings can get you those kind of goal numbers. So for me personally, I still think he outperformed himself slightly. And
gun to your head, who do you think? Yeah, I was going to say gun to your head, because that's the common question, right? Who's first choice? You think Martinelli?
I think so. So the reason I would say that is I think Smith Rowe, he still needs to work a lot on his availability. He had a lot of niggles, and he's currently got one again now in the preseason. And I think what's happened with him is he's been given his own private regime. I think it was Arsenal Vision or Arsblog. They said on their pod that we all thought it was a bit strange that he was playing for the England under-21s, and his last game was mid-June. But he came back like a week or two earlier to Arsenal preseason than any of the others who went away for international for the Nations League. So we think someone has put him on his own kind of program and actually asked the England under-21 team, like, actually, you know what? We need you to play him. We need him to be more robust and more available. Let's put him through his own program where he does play for England under-21s. And he'll come back earlier to the preseason. We'll get him ready. So I do think that there's still a lot more expected of him from Arteta. And he does have the ability to prove that. But I think at least for the first few game weeks, if it carries on like this with Martinelli getting more and more minutes in preseason, I don't see a world in which Smith Rowe will start at the beginning. And I think he'll have to play in Europa and fight for his way to get that spot. The other kind of thing to worth bearing in mind is Smith Rowe, we'd seen him as a kind of like a number 10 previously. Obviously, that's the number he was given. He could even be the answer to our left centre mid. He could play as an 8. I don't think we know his long-term position yet. And although he did thrive on the left wing, I'm not certain that's where he's going to end up permanently. So Martinelli offers so much. We saw in the second half of the last preseason game against Everton, he played a whole half basically at wing back. And that's something that, you see a lot at City with their wing back. Their kind of wingers end up performing a wing back role when they're off the ball and they press quite aggressively.
That's the key thing, though, to mention. It's off the ball, isn't it? I think a lot of people get fixated on that. But yeah, I'm glad you said that. It's off the ball. So
it is off the ball. And I think that's the thing. So I think what he does for Arteta and for his system off the ball, that is enough for him to be ahead of Smith Rowe in the pecking order, because he's learned not to go at 100 miles per hour, as we saw last time round. Like he was slowly brought back from injury. He barely got any minutes. And both him and Arteta said that he'd been taught that he doesn't always need to go at 100 miles and to decide when to go at 100 miles. So I think his decision-making has improved. He had no one to deliver the ball to before. I think his chemistry with Jesus looked very good from a short period of time together already in the preseason game. So I'm really excited. I think he's the 6 million pick for me. When we get to predicted points, we'll actually look at the expected minutes of both these players and lots of the other Arsenal players. So we won't go too much into that. But I think I wanted to point out that like Smith Rowe may have got more goals last season, but I'm not sure that's sustainable. And I'm also not convinced he has a guaranteed spot in the starting 11. I do think it's Martinelli's to lose. And the longer that Martinelli plays in preseason, the more confident I am of starting with him. 6 million feels a steal. We'll talk about penalties later. Obviously, he stepped up and took one that he won. So, but we'll also discuss what that means in terms of him, Saka, Jesus, who's on penalties. We will get there. Yeah, but I think the other thing to bear in mind is he played, I think, 45 minutes in the first preseason game. And then what we noticed was that he then played 71 minutes, as did Xhaka and Saliba in the second preseason game. And one of the other comments that I'd seen online floating around was that Arteta was slowly giving minutes to his kind of team that he's going to start in game week 1 against Palace. So if this continues and you start to see Martinelli getting like full games and like Smith Rowe's not even done a preseason yet, then without doubt, I will be starting the season with Martinelli at just 6 million. I think for $500,000 more than someone like Pedro Neto and a team that doesn't score goals, it just seems like a no-brainer if you can squeeze that money out. I guess let's quickly look at the strikers as well. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the points last season for both mids and forwards, like we did for defenders.
I was just going to say, just on the Martinelli Smith Rowe thing, if I could just add to that as well.
Of course, yeah.
I think exactly similar to you. I'm pretty confident Martinelli's first choice. I think for the same reasons you said about Smith Rowe's availability and him working on his body, I think he'll be eased into the season. And given those Europa League group games, I think he'll come on off the bench 30 minutes, maybe in one of the number 8 roles, depending how Martinelli's playing. Come on off the bench left wing. One thing I went and did was I looked back last year at the individual games, and I wanted to look back and see, were there trends, were there tactical reasons between one game Martinelli was starting, one game Smith Rowe was starting? Because I don't know about you, but last season I found it a bit of a lottery with who was going to turn up on that left wing. So I thought, you know how Luke Disable does it for City? He kind of applies a tactical head and predicts the teams, and he gets it pretty spot on. I thought, I wonder if that's the same with Arteta. And I found a trend where it basically wasn't. It was just enforced decisions that made one of them come out of the team. So obviously the start of the season was tricky because Aubameyang was still around and he affected Martinelli's role in the team, right? So Martinelli and Aubameyang rarely played together because stylistically and the zones they operated in, they're quite similar. But if you look at later on in the year, so just looking middle of September, I know Aubameyang was still around, but what I found interesting was Smith Rowe was starting left wing, right? And there was a period of 8-9 games where he started all of them. And it was Spurs at home, goal and assist. Brighton away, we drew. Palace and Villa back-to-back home games. He got a goal and assist against Villa. Leicester away, he scored. Watford at home, he scored. We then played Liverpool, Newcastle. And the end of that run was Man United away. Unfortunately, we lost, but he scored. It was the weirdest goal. What then happened was he was out of the squad for the next game against Everton, right? And Smith Rowe, Martinelli, their players, if they're available, they're in the squad. So my memory is not that great to go back and think, was it COVID? Was it an injury? But he was out of the squad for that Everton game. Martinelli then came into the team, right? And I know we lost to Everton, but Martinelli then went and played Everton, Southampton, West Ham, Leeds, Norwich, Man City, Burnley, and Wolves game. So again, it was an enforced change that made Martinelli come into the team. Martinelli then went and performed really well. He scored 4 goals in that period, got 2 assists, and it came to an end at Wolves away. Do you remember that weird red card, the 2 yellows within like 5 seconds? Still not over that. But again, what I'm trying to get at, it was an enforced change. What then happened was Smith Rowe came back into the team. He played against Brentford, another enforced change. He was not in the squad for the following 2 games at Wolves and Watford, and that's when Martinelli came in, and he then played the next chunk until, again, Martinelli wasn't in the squad. So can you see what I'm saying? There was a trend between them playing a chunk of games, keeping the shirt because they're performing well, and then an enforced change through suspension, COVID, injury, kept them out. So in my opinion, the conversation needs to be around predict who you think is the first choice left winger and bank on them performing well enough to keep the shirt. Because I think we saw that with Nketiah at the end of last season as well. And that's where I think we're both on the same page with that in thinking Martinelli is the first choice. One thing you said, which doesn't show up in stats, is that work rate, that pressing. It's clear that's where we're heading holistically as a team. Martinelli is the dog's bollocks for that, right? So, yeah, I just thought that was something interesting, which I found looking back on.
No, that's a really interesting analysis. I'm glad you looked into that. I forgot about the double yellow card, which no other team has seen before or since. Painful, isn't it, how certain rules apply for us? But yeah, I think it's exactly that for me. In my view, at the moment is that his off-the-ball work in a team where you could have a front three of Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka, and they can all press as the first tier of the press before it gets to the second tier, and it gives the kind of people in the back line time to get into shape. I think they're going to be relied on more. There is obviously then the worry that if he has a bad game or two, gets injured, whatever, he won't just lose the spot like for one game. Arteta doesn't like to change something that works, we've seen. So if things are going well and, for whatever reason, Martinelli goes out of the squad and Smith Rowe comes in, as long as he does well, he then won't lose the shirt either. So I think if you go for one of them and you get it right, you just got to be aware of when that point might come in time where they are no longer the starter in the Premier League because of that kind of system you've said. And at that point, it's worth moving on from them quite quickly rather than waiting and hoping. I know some people who had Martinelli through the spells where Smith Rowe was starting and they were gutted. They kept him throughout. They started benching him because they thought he was no longer going to start. They then benched him when he got points because he then did get back into the team. So it becomes a whole clusterfuck. So yeah, I'd worry about that a little bit. But the other thing is, let's answer the questions I was going to say. Yeah, let's put up the questions from the guys in the chat because it is about this topic before we move on. So Niels was asking about if Martinelli doesn't start, does he come on? So I think with the 5 subs, it is very likely that if he doesn't start, he will come on. Something to bear in mind as well is the first 4 weeks are kind of like great because there's no midweek, there's no Europe, but they've had to squeeze in all 6 of the European group stage games before the World Cup. So there's actually going to be like a midweek game all the way from game week 5 to game week 16 when we end for the World Cup. So there are going to be, 3 games in 6-7 days every week. So that we will definitely see that there will be a Europa team and a Premier League team, I think. And if you see Martinelli starting the Premier League every weekend and Smith Rowe in the Europa, then you can feel confident. If he, starts in the Premier League, then plays a long number of minutes in the Europa that same week, then I'd start to worry that, potentially he's not going to start the next weekend, 3 games in 7 days. And he will probably sub on to keep him ready for the next game. And so there is going to be a lot of rotation, but for the first 4 weeks, I don't think we need to worry about that. We just go for whoever we think is the starter at left wing. And yeah, I don't think you'll get your first bench, not just from Martinelli, from anyone. So I think I would be shocked if anyone in FPL needs their second bench player before game week 8. Like I just claim. It's a big claim. Guaranteed.
I'm with you for what it's worth.
Before game week 4, definitely not. But even before game week 8, once Europe has started, I don't see it happening. So I think William was worried about the early subs. So I think there could be early subs. But what we'll see is I'm not convinced it will be at 60 minutes. I think it will be later in the game. I think when you look, when you look at the predicted minutes, when we get to the projected points from Hub later, you'll see they're predicting Martinelli to play about 80 minutes every game. So I do think he will stay on the pitch a lot longer than perhaps we're expecting. And then Odegaard, because he is in the midfield conversation, obviously he wasn't in the comparison. He is 6.5 million, so he costs 500,000 more than Martinelli and Smith Rowe. So I would say firstly, Niels, I don't see him competing for that spot. I would see him more as the right 8, so like playing right centre mid. I think his competition or his kind of rotation when he needs rest will be Fabio Vieira, the new signing. And Fabio Vieira will potentially also be rotation for Saka. He could also play left centre mid. But I think on the left wing, Martinelli and Smith Rowe are kind of on their own competing with each other. And for 500,000 less, and for the kind of the number of goals they're more likely to score than Odegaard, I'd rather go for them. I do believe Odegaard will be very nailed on. He does exactly the stuff we were saying that Arteta wants off the ball. He presses. His technical quality is incredible. We're trying to raise the technical ceiling of our team. But for 500,000 less to get someone like Martinelli, I can't spend that extra half. It is just too much for me. And Odegaard has been tasked with trying to score more goals as well, like Smith Rowe was the season before. So maybe there will come a point in the season where Odegaard is an option. I don't see that being game week 1, as much as I hate to say it. I think for me, Martinelli is just head and shoulders above him, but let's see if that goes badly for me.
I mean, you're a better FPL player than me. I don't really have a clue, but just on Odegaard, I do think his output will increase this season. And again, I'm trying to take away from specifically like FPL draft mode. I'm thinking higher level about what I think I'll see on the pitch for Arsenal. And this season, I think what you said about minutes, I think Odegaard will probably be up there amongst all of our attacking options. And one thing I want to look out for, you kind of touched on it in terms of how he's been tasked with scoring more goals. Arteta's been very vocal about the team needing to score more goals from all over the pitch. This is just an opinion. It's not based on anything. I want to see Arteta's all about solutions. You remember Man City, was it 2 years ago when Gundogan broke out and that number 8 role for City it came out of nowhere, what was expected of them on the pitch. I wonder if that's going to be something similar with us that we see with someone like Zinchenko coming in on one side to maintain that technical security. I wonder if Odegaard will be tasked with pushing higher up and further into the box, and having someone like Jesus up front, he's actually got a striker that he can play balls to. Because I think the biggest thing is someone like Lacazette who's stationary. You've got someone like Jesus now who makes runs that weren't being made before. So you like Jesus's run, it commands a pass, if that makes sense. And I think that's something to watch out for. But I'm with you. I think Martinelli is the standout. But Odegaard's positioning is just something I want to keep an eye on in the season. I think the roles of our number 8s are going to be tweaked slightly later on to get more goals. Just one final guy we've not spoken about, Starboy. Any love for Saka? 8 mil?
Yeah, so he is worth mentioning, obviously. When we see the predicted points, he's very high up there. He could potentially have penalties, which we'll discuss when we look at Martinelli and Jesus and who's the penalty taker. I think for me, Saka is maybe top 2 or top 3 in the 8 million midfielder assets. But with Jesus being just 8 million, and for the team structure perspective for me, it's very hard to get Saka in, because I feel like Diaz is the standout best number 8 million midfielder in the game. So unless you're getting Robertson, I just don't see a world in which I would start Saka over Diaz with Mane having left. On the flip side, Saka, we even saw it, right? Like he is very intelligent. Like for a boy of just 20 years old, what he has that none of our wingers had before, like the likes of, say, Theo Walcott or Iwobi, is they were all great athletes and they were fantastic getting into the final third. But no matter how much those players matured, they just didn't have the wise decision-making. Saka at 18, 19 always seems to make the right decision in the final third. And we saw something that I think we'll see more as his chemistry gets better with Jesus in that front line is I think they're going to try for a fluid front three like City, where kind of the left wing striker and right wing just they interchange position in game. They one cut Jesus goes out to the right, Saka drops into the middle, Jesus goes out to the left, Martinelli drops into the middle. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And Jesus' assist to Saka against Everton, the preseason friendly, it was probably aimed for Martinelli, but you can see the clever decision making. Yeah, but you can see the clever decision making from Saka there, where if you watch from before Jesus kind of drops deep, collects the ball, does a turn, and goes to make a pass into the middle, Saka makes quite a long run and quite a clever run to the post. And he's there when Martinelli can't get to the ball and he just taps it in. And it's a fantastic assist from Jesus, fantastic play. You know, we've not had a number 9 who can kind of drop deep, collect the ball, play make, and then also get
and
into
then
the
get
box
in the
to make
box.
a
Yeah,
final ball. So that was incredible. And I do wonder if more and more as we see them kind of build that chemistry, will Saka potentially benefit a lot because he'll have Jesus to target to get assists, but he'll also be able to get onto the end of Jesus's balls. So Saka really excites me. And I think if price wasn't a problem, I'd start the season with both Jesus and Saka, having looked at that FDR for the first 8 weeks and seeing that, Arsenal's second when you look at 8 weeks rather than a smaller spell. But that 2 million on Martinelli just seems a steal. And as long as I'm convinced Martinelli's nailed, I'm willing to start there and maybe wildcard into a setup that has Saka too. But yeah, I think Saka, like the reason we've not mentioned him is just obviously because the other players were cheaper, 6 million and 6.5. But I have no qualms with someone going for Saka. But
It feels like
as
the
you said,
decision is between Saka or Jesus, isn't it? Like you said, you've got that sort of bargain 6 million if you can predict who's actually going to play. And then it feels like either different positions, but the shootout between Saka and Jesus, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and I think just talking about FPL a bit more as well. So thank you for the kind comments. I have very arrogantly put my rank from last
Yeah, I
season
know.
and my name on the
I should
channel.
just put 894 next to me.
Mr. 894 and 895. But so something I do is I treat FPL like poker. So it's different to like betting against the bookies. Because if you bet with the bookies that like a team is going to win or a player is going to score, if it doesn't happen, you lose and the house wins. In FPL, if I bet that Jesus is going to score and he doesn't, 62% of other managers flop with me, so my rank doesn't change. But if I don't have Jesus and I bet that, like a 5% owned Saka will haul where he doesn't, but Jesus does, then I have a lot of people, like millions of them to catch up with in the game. And for me, the start, like just talking about tactics about FPL, going away from Arsenal for a second, those first 4 weeks, they're like, you can't win FPL in the first week, but you can lose FPL sure as shit. So I don't want to spend the season playing catch up. And I'll only ever have 2 or 3 kind of differentials in my starting 11 when a season starts, because I don't want to have to be forced into an early wild card or a big -8 to restructure my team. And when Jesus is as owned as he is and as a kind of big signing, as we've said, like maybe the biggest impact since Sanchez, like one of our biggest signings in 10 years, and the way he's heating up in preseason, I can't see a world in which at that ownership, I would not have him. The other thing is price points. So if Jesus flops, there's like 14 other strikers within 1 million of him that I can get to and I can downgrade. If Saka flops, he will drop to 7.9 mil. And all the other 7-8 million players who are good, they will go up in price. So although it might be a 0.1 million price drop, people like Diaz, Mount, Madison, Foden, they will all go up to, let's say, 8.1, potentially on the Saturday night, just straight after scoring. And then you've got Saka sitting at 7.9. So now your 0.1 drop is actually a 0.5 drop because you can only buy 7.5 mids. And for me, the midfielders at 7.5 and below, they are terrible. They're all terrible. They're all watch and sees. Whereas with the forward line, there are players at 7 million and less that I would happily take over Jesus if he flops. So I just feel like from a game theory point of view, there's that element of going with the pack, higher ownership. If it flops, there's loads of assets to go to. I won't be priced out. There's no other 8 million forward I want. Whereas Saka, if I get him and he flops, he will just from dropping 0.1 price me out of every other good 8 million asset. So I'd rather kind of not risk it at the start. But yeah, let's very briefly touch on the forwards and then we'll go to, we'll look at the kind of predicted points and my draft team. So I know you kind of got this screenshot if you want to read it out to the podcast listeners from Sky Sports of Gabriel Jesus' time at Man City since he arrived in 2017.
Yeah, so it's basically just the graphics splitting, when he starts, when he's subbed on. So we're obviously interested in how did he do when he started, considering he's going to be nailed pretty much. So 99 appearances when starting, 53 goals, 23 assists. And I know caveats, it was at Man City, chances galore at that team, but I just think it highlights what this guy's capable of. I think so many people are kind of painting him with the brush of City reject, this, that. And like, we don't need to do this again. We touched on it at the start, but what he brings to the team and his just being the main man, working in a team that's sort of tailored towards him, I don't see why you would go without him to start the season, to be honest. I think just thinking holistically over the course of the season, like he's going to get double double figures in goals. Well, it's not a guarantee, but that's the expectation at least, isn't it? And yeah, I'm just so excited for him. I think where last year with Lacazette, we had to score perfectly created and constructed goals through structural play. I think now we're actually going, I think you said it earlier, we're going to be scoring goals through chaos and havoc. And we saw a bit of that when Nketiah came into the team against like Chelsea, and I think the other one was Leeds, right? He was just pressing Meslier from the off. And I think we're going to score goals from mistakes, which is what the top teams do. He excites me so much, and I just don't see a world where I go without him, to be honest, to start the season.
I thought
Nketiah,
he'd
is
come
he?
in at 8.59 million. We'll come to Nketiah in a second, but Jesus, I thought he'd be like 8.5 million minimum. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was 9 or 9.5. Is the cheapest he's been in like ever since he arrived in the Premier League. And that, like, honestly, it's insane value in my opinion.
The first four fixtures, what's your prediction? Goals. What was it? So it's Palace away, Leicester home, Fulham,
Bournemouth and Fulham, yeah.
Fulham.
Yeah, I think I would be happy with 2 goals, 2 assists there in those 4 games. 4 goal contributions, 1 a game. I think when you look at his numbers, like his XG, people say he underperforms it and that he needs to work on his finishing. I would argue that means he's getting the chances. So he's in the positions that none of our strikers before were. So I'm convinced he will come good. The other side of it is when you look at the next picture, so the highest goal involvement per 90 since August 2016 from Yahoo. Only Mohamed Salah and Sergio Aguero have a higher goal involvement per 90 minutes in the Premier League. He's above Kane, Son, and Sterling since the day he arrived in the Prem. And this is while maybe being a bit part player, not being the star of the team. I like his philosophy as well. He was asked, has he been brought in to be like the star of the team? And he was kind of like, they tried to spin it, the clickbait merchants like the Sun, God forbid, as he doesn't want to be a star. No, what he actually said was that, like, I don't see myself as like the star or just a one-man team. Like, I'm here to help everyone else like become winners. Like, he comes with 4 Premier League winners medals, and you know, he's not a City reject. He was trusted in the semi-final against Madrid.
He was always that big game player as well.
He was a big game player,
yeah. He always.
And when they were going for the league title, right, against Liverpool last season, he was trusted to play in like all of those last games in the run-in because he's respected. For the off-the-ball stuff he does as well. Like, I think it was Pep who said that he considers him the best pressing forward in the world. So, for what Arteta's trying to build, like, sounds ideal to me.
Just conscious of time. Do you think?
Yeah, let's keep going. I think we can skip this part and let's go to the Jesus and Nketiah comparison.
Is Nketiah a threat to Jesus' minutes for you?
No, not at all. So I think for me, Nketiah will play in the Europa League. He'll start all the cup games as well. I do think with 5 subs, we will see him come on at the end of games. Whether that's for Jesus or not depends on if we're chasing the game. So I'm not convinced he'll just sub on and Jesus will sub off. We saw in the first preseason game, they did spend time together on the pitch and they also developed some good chemistry. When Nketiah wasn't on the pitch against Everton and Jesus scored, he did his celebration and he kind of looked over to Nketiah on the bench and gave him a tribute. So there's already a great chemistry there. And I can see a world in which like Jesus moves to the right wing and Nketiah comes on in the center and they both play. We even saw that formation in preseason where we played with a kind of like a 4-4-2. So I would not be surprised to see Arteta look at ways of working them both into the team. But I think it will be Nketiah subbing on.
I think eventually there will be Premier League games where Jesus is afforded a breather, but that won't be to start the season. I think, like you said, it will be. Yeah, he's coming in as a new signing, and he's a level raiser. He is fine. Like, you don't need to worry about that. But I think later on in the season, depending on how the Europa League's going, that may be a factor later on. I wouldn't be surprised if there's the odd game where Jesus gets a breather and Nketiah leads the line to start, but then with 5 subs, Jesus gets substantial minutes. But that's not a worry to start the season, in my opinion.
I think just to read out the numbers as well. So last season, Jesus had 8 goals and 8 assists. And Nketiah had 5 goals and 1 assist, which is quite impressive. He only had 800 minutes compared to 1,800 for Jesus. But you can see that he's very much not as much of a playmaker or creative player. Maybe off the wing he can be. Big chances per 90. Nketiah actually edges Jesus here at 0.76 compared to 0.62. XG per 90, he edges him at 0.49 to 0.45. XA per 90, as we were saying, is actually in Jesus' favor at 0.34 to 0.22. From an expected goals involvement percentage while they're on the pitch, it's 25% for Jesus versus 18% for Nketiah. I think those 8 assists really make a difference for Jesus' favor.
I think with that comparison, we have to be a bit careful, isn't it? Because Jesus' minutes were quite mixed in terms of when he was coming on, where he played at right wing. And Nketiah obviously had that spell of 8 to 10 games where he was starting. But yeah, stylistically, I think that's where we should probably be thinking. And
I think just from what you said, right? Like if Jesus was coming off the bench a lot, his minutes per goal off the bench were 248, whereas his minutes per goal when starting were 152. So there's a big difference if Jesus is a starter at centre forward rather than a bit part player at right wing. So I think that's a big
fun
difference.
game for you. Higher or lower? 15 Premier League goals, Jesus.
So I would have said I'd be happy with a season where there's 20 goal contributions. So with goals and assists, I would want 20 plus. I'm not like, I would love to say he can get 15 Premier League goals or more. But I think for me, if he can get 13 or more and get at least 7 assists, I'd be very happy with that as the first season in the Prem. All competitions, I would not be surprised to see 20 goals from Jesus.
I just meant specifically Premier League just for the sake of the FPL thinking for everyone out there.
So who do you think's on penalties then? So we talked about Saka and Martinelli and Jesus, and they're 3 forwards we've really touched on. Do you have any inkling? Do you have any ITK knowledge? Have you found someone at the club to tap into Mikel Arteta's phone?
Oh, I wish. That's the lottery question, isn't it? I can't figure it out. And I think it's something that will become, that's not very helpful, but I think it's something that will become clearer in pre-season. Obviously, there was the situation towards the end of last season against Chelsea, where it was meant to be Martinelli, Saka took it, and then the flip side against Man United, Saka went, oh no, sorry, have I got that the other way around?
So I think Martinelli wasn't on the field against United, and then Saka took another one, having scored at Chelsea. But then Martinelli wasn't on the pitch, so we don't know for that one, right?
Yeah, I think my instinct is it's going to be Jesus. I think just coming in as the striker. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a lazy narrative to drive, but I do think it's going to be Jesus. Unfortunately, I think it's.
I agree. I think it's him as well. There are question marks of like kind of his abilities. He has actually missed more penalties than he's scored. He's only ever scored 3 Premier League penalties. If you look at his career, all competitions, including Brazil, he has actually missed more than he's scored. So I think he'll be given them to like get him off the board and start getting some Premier League goals for Arsenal and build that confidence as the star man. But if he kind of continues with the same form of penalty successes he has in his past career, he may lose them, which then kind of brings us to the debate of, is it Martinelli or Saka next? And
that's where it's exciting for potentially Martinelli, isn't it? If he's 6 million, and I don't think it's a case of dismissing Martinelli might be on pens. It could be. I think the biggest thing is it would be doing everyone a disservice to go and say, yep, definitively this guy's on pens. I think we just need to kind of get that information. I remember when we signed Willian, Arteta outright said in his press conference, oh no, Aubameyang's still on penalty. So I wonder if we will get that closer to the season, that bit of clarity. But it's always fun to speculate, right? And I think
it is.
Yeah,
and I think one thing about Martinelli is he took the one on the last day against Everton when both him and Saka were on the pitch, but he won that penalty. And I'm sure I'd seen Arteta say something about whoever wins it can decide if they want to take it. So I do wonder if that day when Saka took it against Chelsea, he was just really pumped up and he was like, I need to put my World Cup penalty miss behind me. I'm going to take this. And he took it from Martinelli. Then Martinelli didn't play, so Saka took the one against United. Then Martinelli won the next one.
The Euros miss. I hope that's Euros, preempting a World Cup miss as well.
I'm already jinxing it. Oh God. But yeah, we'll go to the next section just to be conscious of time. So we looked at the points last year for defenders and goalkeepers. We'll look at the points last year for the midfielders and forwards. So Saka was flying ahead with 179 points. Odegaard 131, Smith-Rowe 125, Martinelli 110. The rest aren't worth discussing at this point, I don't think. And in the forwards, we've got Jesus at 120 and Nketiah at 55. Again, Jesus' numbers, we've got to take them with a pinch of salt, being in a different team and not being the starter and not being the forward. What this does tell you is that Saka is definitely a great FPL option, but it is purely game theory and ownership at the moment that leans me towards Jesus. One worry is that if Jesus has penalties, is the conversion rate he has right now good for FPL? Because if he's going to miss more than he scores, that's not good for us as FPL owners. But I definitely think for now, I think it's Jesus' penalties. I have a feeling Martinelli is ahead of Saka on the penalties personally. But again, we will wait and see. Let's go to the next thing, which is the predicted points tool. So for the first 8 game weeks, which Arsenal players does Fantasy Football Hub think will get the most points? For anyone watching, or if you're on podcast, if you come to the 1 hour timestamp, you can actually see the predicted points per game, and you can also see the predicted minutes. So Jesus is on 42.4 points for predicted points in the first 8. Martinelli at just 6 million is on 40.5. Saka at 8 million is on 36.7 predicted, and Odegaard's up there with 34.4. Immediately you can see Odegaard's predicted minutes are 90 minutes every game. Saka's is 82 every game. Martinelli's is 80 every game. So this isn't the case that Martinelli's predicted higher points because he's predicted more minutes than Saka. He's predicted less minutes than Saka, but still getting more. That's why I'm looking at the Martinelli Jesus double up as opposed to Saka and Jesus. I think I can save the 2 million, and I believe Martinelli is his spot to lose. He has to flop for Smith Rowe to get that spot back.
This is interesting. I feel like predicting and succeeding in which Arsenal attacking assets you go is going to be winning the X minutes prediction, I think. And like obviously this tool's just kind of got blanket minutes out there at the minute, but yeah, they're in our opinion 4 of that's going to be the front 3 and Odegaard in the right 8. It's just is Odegaard actually going to play 90 minutes? And it's those sort of small nuances that you need to look at nearer the season. But this is great seeing this and seeing, if they are to play the minutes there against those fixtures, how their points are predicted to come out. So, yeah, that's really interesting that Martinelli's higher than Saka.
I was shocked to see this, honestly. I'm still interrogating the hub to find out exactly the input. I know there's some bookies odds, some underlying numbers, but Martinelli is, like we saw, his big chances per 90 were double that of Smith Rowe, right? He only got the 5 Premier League goals, I think it was, compared to or maybe it was 6 or 7, but compared to the 10 from Smith Rowe, like I don't think it's going to be that way around this season.
I just think on Martinelli, sometimes like you just have to gamble, right? I think for 6 million, where we're predicting he will be first choice, Smith Rowe's, I don't know, he's not really fully fit at the moment. Obviously, monitor pre-season, but I'd put good money on Martinelli starting the season. And like we said, you just have to kind of hope that he does well enough to keep the shirt. For 6 million, with that block of 4 fixtures, which in my opinion, excluding Palace away, is kind. I think you roll the dice, don't you? Like, why wouldn't you?
When you look at what else is available at 6 million, right? So the highest owned 6 million asset in the game at about 20% right now is Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle. And like he gets in the box and scores, but he's a late runner CM. Like, we're looking at a winger that might have penalties after Jesus. And it's like, Newcastle's attack does not do well. They don't score many goals. So 6 million for a CM from Newcastle, like, is he really worth 20% ownership over Martinelli? Like, not in any world. So he will be one of my free differential punts in my Game Week 1 team, I think. I'm very happy with that. Looking at the rest of the predicted points, so these were the top 4. There was obviously the next 4, and they were all from the defense. So it's interesting to see that the likes of Smith Rowe and other attackers, they're not here at all. So Ramsdale, Tierney, Tomiyasu, and White are all above.
I'm guessing that's a minutes thing, though, right? The tool's probably predicting Smith Rowe getting 20, 25 minutes. So
exactly. Yeah. So Ramsdale comes in at 32.9 predicted points in the first 8 weeks, which is 2 points below Odegaard. Tierney comes in at 32 points at 5 mil. Tomiyasu 30.4 points. White 28.3. So again, for me, like, is what I was saying before. Gabriel is here, but he's the 9th man. So for Gabriel to be 5 million and to be predicted less than both Tomiyasu and White, it doesn't feel worth the extra money to me. The difference between Tierney and Tomiyasu, considering how injury-prone Tierney is, for 1.6 predicted points more over 8 game weeks, I'd again rather save the $500,000 personally. I can see why people are going for Gabriel for the assured starts. I can see why people might want to go for Tierney for the exciting threat. But I just can't see past Tomiyasu at the moment. I think he's safer than both White and Gabriel with the Saliba situation for now. So for me, this was just worth looking at.
The flip side, though, is
points.
Tomiyasu is also a bit injury prone, isn't he? So while
Yeah,
I think you said it earlier, I can see situations where if Tomiyasu's out, Ben White will play that inverted right back role and Saliba will come in at centre back. It's a hard one because Arteta does seem like he loves Cedric, but yeah, that's something I could see sometimes happening.
I
But
think for me, the good news there is you would think if a Tomiyasu isn't starting, he won't be subbing on
yeah,
because he's injured. That's why he's not starting, in my opinion. So,
yeah, agreed.
so with that world, if let's say I've got my Neko Williams, a 4 million fullback on the bench as a fifth defender, or I've got Andreas Pereira playing number 10 for Fulham behind Mitrovic, just got an assist from a corner for Mitrovic in pre-season.
Oh, did he?
He's playing the Carvalho role. So 4.5 million mid. If he's on my bench and I know he's going to be playing for Fulham, if Tomiyasu doesn't start and he's my fourth defender, I'll happily take Pereira from Fulham off the bench and just wait for Tomiyasu and bench him till the day comes that he's back fit again. So I think that's the flip side is I don't mind. Whereas I'd be more pissed off if my 5 million is there. So let's go to wrapping up and just answer. There was 1 or 2 questions from Twitter, I think. We have probably answered them throughout, but I'll have a look at any of the live questions I starred. Before we do those questions, guys, get your questions in the live chat. I'm just going to very quickly for the podcast listeners give my draft team because we've referenced it quite a few times. It does have free Arsenal assets. It will probably still have free Arsenal assets come game week 1. But if you have any final
We're gonna have
questions,
so much egg on our face, aren't we?
maybe. But remember, it's a game like poker. So if the other masses have egg on their face and I still have a 1,000 OR, I'll be very happy. So I have Sanchez at the back at the moment. That could be any 4.5 defender. Sorry, goalkeeper. It could be Raya. I could have Mendy. I could even have Lloris instead of like a Spurs defender like Perisic. So I have 1.5 million in the bank, so that can change. I have Cancelo, James, Trent, Tomiyasu will play every week. Luis Diaz, Martinelli, Neto, Salah. I'm looking at downgrading Neto to Leon Bailey, 5 million from Villa. He was injured a lot. That's why we didn't see him last time round. And there's a big chance that if he has the kind of continues the way he is in the preseason now, that he will actually be a gem at 5 million. I think he's a lot better than Neto for a more attacking team. And Haaland and Jesus up front. So that's kind of my draft. Let's go to the questions. I'm just going to pull up the ones that we had from Twitter. So the main one, I think, was Jesus and penalties. So we've answered that. So in the timestamps, we'll talk about where that was for Sacred Silenced on Twitter. You can go back there. Saka versus Mount and others at that price point. So I think, as I said, my view is that Diaz is the standout 8 million. I do think that if one of Mahrez or Foden was nailed, they'd be second. I think Saka comes in at third with Maddison and Mount tying in at fourth and fifth. That's kind of my preference at the 8 millions. Zinchenko versus Tierney and Neldner. So we talk about the defense of Zinchenko. So go back to that timestamp and have a look, mate. And then just a few final questions from the live chat as opposed to Twitter. So I've starred a few here. So we had Mike Halpin. Good to see you as well, mate. We didn't give him a shout out when he joined. He's going Martinelli, Jesus double up. He asks, do we think that Saliba becomes an option this season? So this will be our last question.
At periods during the season, absolutely. I think it's entirely injury dependent, though. I think there's not going to be periods where, there are going to be periods where we get injuries. Like that's just, that's the nature of football.
I think he's very close to starting. So he's potentially, if 3 of the back 4 get an injury, he has a way in. If Tomiyasu gets an injury, Ben White will go to right back. He'll come in. If White gets an injury, he'll come in. If Gabriel gets an injury, he'll come in. The only defender that gets an injury that doesn't impact him is if Tierney gets an injury. That won't change him starting. So any one of 3 players not being fit is a shoe-in for Saliba. And the way he's looking in preseason, the confidence and calm, the stature, the stuff you can't teach, just the presence, the kind of the ability on the ball. I do think he will be fighting hard to get in, and he'll probably start in the Europa, but he's very close to getting into the team, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he'll start in the Europa, but it's one to keep an eye on. Didn't Arteta say the other day that Ben White has a bit of a knock and he's being eased back in? So it's one to keep an eye on for the start of the season. Like if Ben White's out, absolutely bloody hell, I'll be. Well, I might not be all over him because we don't have enough information to know if White will come straight back in or not. But during the season, when there are injuries in that sort of right centre back, right back role, I think so. Absolutely.
The opportunity will come. So I guess just I've realized Neil's Apples is Sacred Silence on Twitter, so he has
Oh,
actually been here live. So thank you for tuning in live. We'll wrap it up here, 1 hour, 9 minute in. We've really enjoyed having you all here. We broke the concurrent live viewers record of last week. So for episode 2, that's awesome. If we can try and get to over
everyone.
10 viewers next week, we'll be chuffed. As I said before, if you found this useful, please do hit like. It really helps the channel grow. We're on our journey to 100 subscribers. So if you're not a subscriber and you enjoyed this, want to see more content, hit subscribe. If you're on podcast listening on Spotify or Apple, we love the 5-star reviews, even if you think it's 1-star quality. So it's up to you, but be a good person and help us out. Other than that, I think we're going to get ourselves out of here, but it's been a pleasure to see you as always, Clayton. We will do another one before game week 1, I think. Just looking into kind of Arsenal and the final performances in pre-season, which signings we signed, and what our thoughts are. We may have like 10-minute FPL segments in future episodes as well, and we're going to do lineup predictions. So if you're just an FPL fan, if you don't support Arsenal and you just want to tune in for those bits, we'll timestamp those going forwards. If you are a Gooner, then obviously do join us, and the episodes will be much shorter when the season starts. We're thinking of 2 30-minute episodes, one on a Sunday right after the game to look at a review, and one just before the weekend to look at predictions and lineups. So they are going to be bite-sized, but in preseason we thought we'd have a little play around and do slightly longer ones. So we were the Arsenal BiteSize Podcast. I'm FPL Nima, joined by Clayton at AFC BiteSize Pod on Twitter. And big love for everyone for joining us and for keeping us company. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers,
Take care,
everyone.
guys.
Up the Arsenal.
Up the Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners.